Good morning, everyone. So nice to have you with us today. My name is Anna Siefken, and I'm the Executive Director for the Wilton E. Scott Institute for Energy Innovation at Carnegie Mellon University. Very excited for our panel this morning in our continuing webinar series, where we're looking at technologies and innovations that can help us drive towards a sustainable low-carbon future. So as I mentioned, I'm Anna Siefken. I'm the Executive Director. I have all of my social here so that you can get in touch with me. And I'm excited to get right into the content for today. So the Scott Institute focuses on partnerships, on innovation. We support entrepreneurs and students all in that journey towards our energy future. So we are the hub for energy-related research at Carnegie Mellon University and are very interested in connecting with you. I want to give a special shout out this morning to two of my colleagues, Daniela and Aswaria. They are integral to the creation of this webinar series, and I wanted to give them a quick little shout out this morning as we get started. So the purpose of these webinars, as I mentioned, is to bring together thought leadership around these important topics. So we're an R1 university. We do research to support innovation that's happening in the world. And so from our perspective, hearing from these voices is critically important to the work that we do. So today's webinar, very important topic. And on a glorious sunny day in Pittsburgh today, we're going to be talking about scaling solar. So we're looking at industry insights and gaining ground in 2021. So we have a couple of upcoming webinars I want to speak to. So next week, and I'll talk a little bit more about this one. We have one on March 4th that I'll get to in just a second. We do have CMU Energy Week, which is coming up in just a few weeks in March. I'll talk about that as well in terms of the schedule. We have a distinguished lecture from one of our alums, Michael Wall, who is with Olympus Energy, and that will be on April 7th. And then a newly announced on April 13th, Martin Keller, who is the director of the National Renewable Energy Technology Laboratory, will be giving a distinguished lecture, once again, in this virtual format. So as I mentioned, grid is critically important right now. What we're seeing in other parts of the country, Texas in particular, is making us realize how important it is for us to have resilience in our electrical system. So next week, at the same time, next Thursday morning, we will actually have 3 experts talking about energy resilience. One, a California utility, a Pittsburgh-based utility, and one of our city planners who's looking at an Oakland energy plan. As I mentioned, CMU Energy Week is coming up March 22 through 26. It's entirely virtual this year, and the schedule is somewhat similar to what we've done in the past, but we are doing an abbreviated schedule. So we're doing our career fair on Monday. That's for CMU and Pitt students. We have our brief notes, which I'll talk about in a second, on Tuesday. We're doing an investor forum and pitch showcase, so you can be in the audience to watch pitches from startups. If you're an investor, we have a separate place for you to register. We're doing a poster competition for our students. Again, a great opportunity to find your future employee. And on Friday, a special event that we're doing, a pitch showcase with the American-Made Solar Prize. So those of you who know that we serve as a power connector with that program will get to see the 20 teams as they present their technologies. So on that Tuesday, as I was mentioning, we're doing a series of brief notes, and I wanted to give you a couple of highlights. So Jim Skay, who's one of the IPCC co-authors, as well as a Scott Institute Board of Advisor member, is going to be talking about the importance of combating climate change. Catherine Hamilton and Michael Dorsey will be with us. Paula Glover, who is the new president for the Alliance to Save Energy, will be giving a brief note. And you can see the rest, including some of our local officials. Bill Peduto has been particularly vocal recently with his Marshall Plan. And as of today, we are announcing 2 special networking sessions. So if you get our newsletter, you'll get the information about them this afternoon. But on Tuesday, following our brief notes, and on Friday, following the pitch competition, we'll be doing a series of networking events. So all of the information about this is at cmuenergyweek.org. Finally, there's a lot of ways I mentioned how to get in touch with me specifically, but these are ways to get in touch with the Scott Institute. We do want to make sure that you're following along with all of our programming. And if you want to have a webinar like this in partnership with us, much as Jennifer contacted us and wanted to have this particular session, please get in touch with my colleague, Daniela. So a special thank you today to our 3 participants and their organizations. So we have the Solar Energy Industries Association, PSG Group, and Cook Medical. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and tell you a little bit about our guests, who you can now see. All right, so first we have today, and I'm very excited to have a longstanding expert in the solar industry, Abby Hopper, with us. She's the president and CEO of the Solar Energy Industries Association, the national trade organization for America's solar energy industries. She oversees all of SEIA's activities, including government affairs, research, communications, and industry leadership, and is focused on creating a marketplace where solar will constitute a significant percentage of America's energy generation. Erin Kunkel is here. She's the global manager for corporate social responsibility with Cook Medical, which is aiming to maximize the positive impacts Cook has on people, communities, and the planet. So Cook Medical invests, manufactures, and delivers a unique portfolio of minimally invasive medical devices to the healthcare systems of the world. So as you can see, we have a variety of voices here. We wanted to hear about someone who's implementing, someone who is doing some of that implementation work, as well as experts sort of looking at this global landscape. And finally, proud alum of Carnegie Mellon University's Tepper School of Business is Jennifer Merzlach. She is the president of PSG Energy Group with 18 years of experience in engineering, project management, and business development. So PSG Energy Group partners with their customers to reduce their energy consumption and implement on-site renewable solutions. So I am extremely excited about this conversation today. But as I mentioned to our speakers right before we came on, I would be remiss if I didn't ask the first question about what's happening in Texas. So obviously, when we hear about renewables and the explosion of renewables around the country in terms of deployment, Abby, I'd love to hear your perspective on how we should be thinking about this with all of the news that we're receiving, because obviously we're still in the middle of this crisis that's happening there. And not all of the news has been great in terms of renewables. People are actually making some associations. Can you clear the air for us a little on that?
Absolutely. So Anna, thank you so much for inviting me to participate today, and to CMU for hosting us. And Jennifer, thank you for visioning this and getting us all in one place. I'm so excited for this conversation. So first of all, I mean, I think all of our hearts go out to the folks in Texas who have suffered and continue to suffer under this extended outage and all of the disasters that have gone along with it. I think there's going to be a lot of learnings from this experience, but I think one of the most important learnings is that, you know, what has happened in the past is not a good predictor for what's going to happen in the future, right? And so the ways that we have regulated energy markets and thought about what risks may be inherent in weather and in operations is just not a good, it's not a good indicator, right? The world is changing. You can debate all day long about why that might be the case, but the fact is it is. And so you need to have a different way of thinking about generation and about markets and about, you know, reserve margins. But I would say, you know, all the data, and you know, including from the head of ERCOT, the market, who runs, you know, the Texas market, is that it was not renewables, and it certainly was not wind that created this crisis. It was the more traditional fossil fuels, which were just not insulated in the way because they didn't need to be for a long time, right? It's Texas. And so I live here in Washington, D.C. It's been a great political theater as people have tried to blame, you know, the Green New Deal for Texas's power outages. Obviously, the Green New Deal hasn't passed, and certainly it was not implemented in Texas, that's for sure. So I think, you know, as the facts come out, there'll be some thoughtful direction on how we could avoid this in the past, but it goes right to the heart of our conversation today. The world is changing, and our energy generation needs to evolve along with it. Companies are doing things differently, and we're going to talk about all of that. So thanks, Anna, for that question.
Excellent. Thank you. I appreciate your perspective. So I'm going to go to my first question, and I think I'm going to move us back to gallery view. Perfect. So with that, and kind of thinking about the big picture, I'd love each of your perspectives on what you're thinking with the Biden administration. So there's a number of obviously clean energy initiatives. How do you think that the environment conversation is going to change over the next few months and years? And how are federal and global incentives going to change? Are there going to be new requirements that people should be thinking about? And I'm not sure which of you can start that question best. Abby, we might just put it back to you, and then Jennifer, you could speak to that a bit too.
Sure, I'm happy to, and I'll be brief. But I just want to let everyone know, if you don't, we are in the Solar Plus decade. We at SEIA, so I have the honor of representing the solar industry in the United States. So everything from publicly traded companies to a one-person shop that sees this as a way to help shape their future, and everything in between, all 50 states, federal policy, state policy. So I come at this with a very global perspective on what's happening in energy. And I would say that we are in the Solar Plus decade. Our goal is to be 20% of energy generation in this nation by 2030. I think we're going to update that goal actually, because we're killing it, but we can have that conversation later. So how are things different now? The environment feels very different post national election and at the end of last year. And so we are having conversations about how we go big and bold in the legislative space, because we really have an opportunity to do that with our President Biden and with a blue Senate and House. And so I think we will see a really aggressive package of incentives for clean energy writ large, solar being among them, storage being among them. We will see incentives for installations on schools, installations on public buildings, installations in lower income communities. We'll see a lot of focus on workforce development to make sure that our workforce is as diverse as our nation. And so I think there'll just be an incredible amount of momentum and excitement moving forward. So I'm happy to talk about any and all of those, but that's what I see here in Washington. Obviously, there's also 50 states that are doing energy policy in our nation, as well as all the cities and counties, but that's what's happening in Washington.
So Jennifer, before you get started, I want to make sure I remind all of our guests that they can put questions in the Q&A. So use the Q&A today, and we'll get to those questions either as we go or at the end.
No, sure. And thanks, Anna. I wanted to second Abby's. Thank you for having us today. And really everything Abby said, I mean, she did a great job covering it. Things I would add is that it is different still at the state level, and I think we'll continue to see that. I think some incentives may phase out in certain states, but it could jump up with putting incentives in for storage. I do, we'll hit on it more later, but I think it's a really good time because the pricing has come down, but incentives still exist. So it's a good time to act. And then from the global perspective, I think more so instead of incentives, it's switching to expectations. So we see it here in the Midwest. We're based in Indianapolis, PSG Energy Group, but you see it in the Midwest that if there is a company or a facility that's owned by a global corporation, it's really switched over to expectations. They want to see their new buildings having on-site renewables incorporated. That's my ad.
So Erin, are you seeing anything different from the work that you're doing?
So in the policy space, we're really trying to keep our eyes open and track as we go. We want to be aware and ready for any changes. I can say that in terms of incentives and policy kind of pushing businesses to be more intentional in the renewable energy space, any movement in that area kind of makes my job a little easier, trying to push us forward in sustainability. And it makes it more compelling for our leadership and easier for them to make that kind of decision. So that's definitely what I'd like to see.
So in terms of upcoming deployment, I know, Abby, you have a couple of slides that you want to show in terms of like thinking about the future. So I'm going to try the technology here and see if I can share my slides and show what you have. So do you want to tell us a little bit about this?
Sure. Thank you, Anna. So just two slides. The first one looks both that solar deployment in the past as well as our forecasts for the next few years moving forward. Everyone always asks me, why is 2016 so tall? So I'll answer that. That was when we thought the investment tax credit, the primary tax credit for our industry, was going to be expiring. And so there was a big push to get things done. We were successful in extending it. So that didn't actually happen. 2017 and 2018 was when we had a whole conversation around solar tariffs at the beginning of the Trump administration. But I want to bring you to 2020. So what day is it? February 20 something. As we sat here, if we'd been here a year ago, I, for one, had heard of coronavirus, but probably like a lot of folks didn't realize quite what an impact it was going to have on our world. The solar industry really struggled, especially at the beginning and especially in the distributed generation community. But we actually have an incredible story to tell in 2020. So you will see that we broke records this year. We grew over 43% year over year. And as you can see, we're set to continue to do that in the out years. There's some policy work to keep it growing on that solar plus decade. But the other thing to really point out is that all sectors of the market will continue to grow and continue to have market share. But I want to talk about one in particular, Anna, if you could go to the next slide, and that really is the commercial deployment. So those are a variety of different installations, but focusing specifically on corporates. And so Erin, it's so good to have your voice here, and I appreciated what you were saying about leadership and other corporates taking on solar installations. 2019 was the largest year ever for on-site commercial installations. So just as an example, I may be Target's biggest customer. I'm not sure, but I feel like I am. I go there for like milk and I end up with, underwear and like everything. Like I have 3 kids and every trip to Target is an adventure. But Target has about 1,500 stores in the United States. 500 of them have solar on the roof, which is pretty amazing. Same with Amazon, same with Walmart. I mean, these are some huge companies that are making really intentional investments, both in on-site solar, but also solar that they're buying through power purchase agreements. But the thing I want to highlight is that second bullet on the page. Over 2/3 of all commercial installations in 2019 were small businesses. So they were businesses that are really following the example of these big companies that see the economic value, that perhaps their employees are really asking, their customers are asking for it. Maybe their corporate, their global leadership has a vision, but there's an intentionality that's been brought to corporate solar installation. So as we talk about how more of that can happen, I think Jennifer and Erin will have really good insight into that. We know that it trickles down, and people are doing it for rational business and economic reasons, not for policy reasons.
All right, I think I might be frozen as I'm doing this.
Oh, no.
Can you all still hear me?
We can hear you, Anna.
Okay, so let's keep going with the questions as my computer catches up. It doesn't like to do things more than one thing at a time. So let's talk a little bit about more about these corporate drivers. I know that you sort of mentioned a little bit, but so at Cook Medical, what were some of the things that you were thinking about that we can actually leverage in terms of what other companies should be thinking about when they look at these deployments?
So there are a lot of factors at play.
Can you hear?
Yes. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. So we have the unique position of being a family-owned business, privately held. So a big driver for us is leadership interest and owner interest. So that is a key driver. And then also economic viability, the return on investment making sense, and the increased effectiveness, increased durability of the technology as we continue to advance. That's helping the ROI look better and better. So that's obviously a factor. Reputation and a visible demonstration of our environmental commitment also plays in to the conversation here. So lots of dynamics at play. The policy environment with kind of net metering petering out here in 2020 is also part of the conversation, and that policy environment is definitely an incentive to move forward at this time.
So, Jennifer, what are you seeing from some of your other clients and customers?
Yeah,
Are
yeah,
you hearing the same?
I am. I think often the conversation starts with the first sparks come from the sustainability aspect or the feel good side of it. But I think, nothing really goes forward in business unless it makes business sense and has that ROI. And I think understanding the business case is what's key to getting the projects going forward. So thinking of it as an investment and not just CapEx is important. And then I think, we're across sectors. So we work in the C&I with companies like Cook with Erin, but also with schools and municipalities and agriculture. And one thing that, is the same across all those industries is the more they can view into the future and plan and budget and eliminate unknowns and risks, better off they are. So when you put on-site solar, you're giving a portion, in most cases, a large portion of your electrical consumption. You now can budget for it, and whichever way you finance it, you can budget for it, and you eliminate those unpredictable rising rates. And I think that really helps, keeping that in mind, along with, of course, the ROI and the just the on-site tangible portions of it. I mean, we're very aware that on-site solar isn't going to solve everything, isn't going to do all of your offset, but it pairs nicely with, if you go down to virtual PPAs that we had talked about, purchasing from a larger utility scale, or even rec purchases. There's a market out there, but those are less tangible for your employees and customers. So it pairs well to have both.
And I think what we see how we see the market evolving, and Jennifer, I'd be interested if you see this with your customers, is thinking about the value of solar paired with storage as a resiliency asset. And so especially sort of bringing it back to Texas, if you think about not being entirely reliant on the grid, but having some ability to insulate that risk, right? You're talking about price risk, but also kind of risk if you live in California and you're subject to this forced power outages because of wildfires, or you live in Florida and there's incredible, hurricane season is becoming more and more and more active. There is a way, if you pair these technologies together at the right price point, it really does insulate you from that. And I think a lot of corporates are realizing that there is an economic value to that resiliency.
Right. I think that will be more and more part of the future conversations, and understanding the disruption to your operations.
Yeah,
you lose the electricity. But
I
think so. And Erin mentioned it, very local, to Indiana there is full retail rate net metering right now, but it is being phased out over the next few years. So storage is going to become a key component to on-site renewables going forward.
So I realize that you all might not be able to see me for some reason. I'm trying. I have no idea. It's just the way of these days. But for some reason, my camera's not. I'm not coming up yet. Yep, I'm a black box.
Well, so Anna, one last driver that we hadn't mentioned that obviously it's a big driver for K through 12, but once it's in the community, it's available for all the K through 12, is the educational aspects of it. So on-site solar, part of our solution is having kiosks and databases. The students have access to real-time data, and it's giving exposure. It's what Abby talked about. I mean, we're building the labor force now. That labor force is still in high school, still in college, pushing that. So I think that's another great tangible benefit of the on-site solar.
So a question that I have is, so what's stopping us then? So why are we not seeing, I know we're hitting these goals and we continue to sort of get bigger and bigger in terms of what we're aspiring to do, but what is stopping us? And I know that in Pennsylvania, much of what people say is stopping us is our portfolio standard. I know that there are certainly ways that we can improve that. So beyond portfolio standard, or maybe talk about portfolio standards from state to state, tell us more about what is keeping us from moving even faster.
Jennifer, you want to answer that?
Sure. Well, I think the first thing, I think about how much we've done in Indiana without a portfolio standard. So I think the first part is just understanding and the bandwidth and taking the time, right? So that is what COVID disrupted our our market with was just the bandwidth that the decision makers had. They were focusing on so much more, and like respectfully so, focusing on getting students in, the care of their employees. But I think it's just understanding that there is the ROI there and the business cases there, and it's worth sitting down and listening to it. I think also, even for corporations that have the mindset to get there, they can get overwhelmed by it. So you can put a target in to be 100% offset, but then where do you start and how do you start? So I think that really the panel here shows a great demonstration of you're not alone and you can lean on other people. SIA has a ton of resources for its members, but it also just has a ton of resources online and R&D for any company that's looking to it. There's quite a bit available that you can get to right now. Companies like PSG, they're regionally throughout the country. We're more than happy to help you, but you can find partners that can help you take the first steps and support you in your analysis. And then just like Cook Group, there's like-minded things. I think that you do get a competitive edge if you have carbon offset as a priority for your company, but it's also an area where companies don't have to compete. Everyone can win. They can help each other out. So you can look in your sector and your region of companies that have done it and work and share that like-mindedness. So I think a lot of it's just getting the ball rolling and getting started.
Yeah, I would agree with Jennifer, and then I'd be curious, Erin, if this resonates with you as a corporate. But I would say some of what's holding us back is misinformation or misperception, sort of what Jennifer was talking about, a misperception about cost, that it will inevitably be a higher cost option. Our costs have come down about 70% over the last decade, and so that's just not true anymore. There is an economic business case. I think kind of a smaller company can't do it, right? You have to be a Facebook or a Target, right? You have to have an energy load of that size. That's also not true. And I think Erin's a good example of that. No, I mean, maybe you're as big a Target. I don't mean to be rude, but small companies can go solar, and it's standardized a bit. So sort of the contracts are standardized, the financing is standardized, banks understand the return on investment and are much more comfortable lending money to do these kinds of projects. That has been really helpful. But then there's some national policies, things like tariffs, that are inflating our price in a way that they don't need to. That's my job, is to deal with that. And sort of uncertainty about investment tax credit at times, that's also my job to deal with that. So there are some of those things, but I just want to echo what Jennifer said, that there is, I think what I find most often is that people do not realize how mainstream this energy source is becoming. It is no longer sort of a science project or something that just hippies put on their homes. It is a $20 billion a year business, and we are servicing, the biggest companies in the nation as well as the smallest companies in the country.
Absolutely. And just to
Please. Yeah,
real quick. So we have operations globally, and we're not the size of Target, but we have in Denmark and in Australia, we have active solar projects. So the incentives and the policy environments there have made that a no-brainer. So I think that in the US, we've always kind of just hesitated because it's not the same environment. And so we were unfamiliar with that. And the idea of renewable energy credits and net metering and how does this work, I think was a hindrance at first. So the more that we can learn, the more that we can create an open dialogue and question answering and information sharing, the better.
Fantastic. So we have a question that's come in from Chad Doherty. Chad, thank you for your question. It actually says, can someone comment on what are the life cycle sustainability concerns with solar systems, things like waste or durability, availability, procurement? It's a good question. Anyone?
Yeah, go for it.
Sure. Yeah, I can start this, and Abby can add on. No, I think that's a great question. So with anything you put in, there's going to be preventative maintenance and taking care of the system. But there are, when you start looking at the warranties and the performance of it, so I don't know how many are aware, but a solar panel, it has a 25-year performance warranty. I think the IRS has a 30-year life, and they view depreciation for solar. So that is a long-term warranty on that. You will see a key component in the solar arrays are inverters, and those are not talked about as much. It's more the technical side not the solar panels you drive by and see in people's roofs or out in the fields. But the inverters do, you anticipate 10 to 12 years out of those and doing a replacement once during the project. But I would say, you know, when you look at the net present value of these projects, you take all of that into consideration. If you really want to get out ahead, I think recycling solar panels is something that is going to be big in a few decades, that will be needed, and it's not really in place here now. There's some activity in Europe, there's maybe some activity on the coast, but that will be the future. But another point, and doesn't directly answer this, but we do speak of often, is as storage, you know, the R&D in there and the increases and prices come down in storage, that's something you can couple into your project. So you're not going to make your array obsolete. There'll be some tweaking and some engineering work, but the array can then partner with the storage that comes into place.
I don't know that I need to add anything. Thank you.
So let's talk a little bit more then about innovation and technology, because you mentioned that a little bit. So if you were thinking about innovations and technologies, what would be what's on your wish list? What would be the most helpful in terms of something that if it were in place, this would all go much easier? And I do want to, obviously, as a research university, understand a little bit about it from like an R&D perspective.
I mean, I can add a couple of things. I saw that you have the director of NREL, the National Renewable Energy Labs, coming to speak soon, which is awesome. We are partnered with NREL in developing a program called Solar App. It is a software system whereby you can put in the inputs of your solar project, and there are certain standards for permitting. And if you are sort of within these parameters, then there's automatic permitting. That reduces the cost, especially of distributed systems, by about 1/3. And so that kind of innovation and working with the National Lab can have a huge impact on solar deployment. It is, you know, it probably isn't going to make the front page of the New York Times, but it will be incredibly impactful for our industry. And so that's a great partnership we have, and I think a real area for continued innovation. I mean, we've all talked about storage, but if I had my dream, I'm a lawyer, not an engineer, it would be that storage would just be ready, right? Be commercially viable and manufactured here in the US and ready to plug and play at prices. I think that will be an incredible game changer. And then lastly, again, harkening back to Texas, we are but one generation source on a very integrated and complicated grid, and ensuring that we have both the hardware, you know, literally the wires to make sure that all interacts, and the software to make sure that all interacts. And especially as we move towards an electrification of our transportation system, think about EVs as battery sources feeding back into the grid. We need to have a grid that can handle that two-way flow. And so I think there's a ton of opportunity for innovation in there as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of that too. I think thinking the future of grid infrastructure and what that needs to be. And obviously the storage that's like the crux of not just solar, but all the renewables coming together with the grid is the storage component. But I would agree, and Erin brought it up too, of like understanding the incentives and the net metering and PPAs. When I made the decision to move back to Indiana and to go into renewables, I mean, I always had a passion for energy, but part of it was I wanted to get technical again. I was like ready. I joke I'm a retired engineer. I was ready to put that hat back on. And I do have a great team of engineers, but the reality is it's all financing and policy right now. And so what Abby was mentioning, just some of that to streamline it, make it less complicated, not feel like a hurdle people have to get over. I think that is a big part of it, is just streamlining and understanding and taking away some of the complication in the policy and incentives. Would be big.
Erin, anything from your perspective?
I'll just echo storage again. So I think that from a manufacturing perspective, peak shaving, price stability, reliability, like being out of operations because of a power outage is not ideal. That's going to result in back ordering. So having those kinds of drivers and understanding how storage can can support us in manufacturing, I think is a really big deal.
Okay, that's good to hear. It's good for all of us that are working on this day in and day out, right? So I have another Tepper grad who's sent in a question. So this is from Anton Doss, and he is currently with Google Devices and Services. So what role do you see the public sector playing in enabling scale? So I know we've mentioned this, but I think it's a finer point that we could put on this one. Who'd like to start on that? Abby, how about you?
I'll happily start. So, I mean, the public sector is one of the biggest purchasers of electricity in our nation. A couple jobs ago, worked for the governor of Maryland, and we worked with our university system to be an off-taker for renewable energy systems. It seems really obvious, then it seemed really transformational, which is kind of fun. But if we think about sort of the federal government load and where do we have levers to pull in the federal government load, both in DoD or in sort of civilian government, both in terms of their building use and their housing and their vehicles, I think they can be an early mover, or not early mover because we're kind of along the path, but they can certainly be an impactful player in offtake. And then if you sort of move down to both the state and the local level, I'd be interested in hearing what Jennifer has to say about our customer base, but that muni market, right? Like the mush, right? It's called the mush market. Local governments, there's so many local governments that have committed to going 100% renewable, and those policy drivers really matter. If we think about the state of California, they have a housing requirement that all new construction, residential construction, be solar ready and installed with solar on their roof. They did the economic analysis, and it makes sense, sort of cost over the life of ownership. There's some towns and cities that have also done that. So those kinds of policy moves, and then where sort of others, like Erin was saying, seeing other corporates do this, or other cities and towns and states see, okay, this actually helps the market and it helps the cost of home ownership, right? It makes really important economic sense to do these things. I think that's where the government and sort of public organizations have a really important role to play.
Yeah, I would definitely say, and one thing to note, and it kind of counteracts the thing where I said that streamline and make everything the same, but the more local you get, the quicker decisions can be made. So, Abby brought up California, but St. Louis has put in the same thing, that new construction needs to be PV ready. So they have to think about the structural and electrical infrastructure on any new construction right now. It doesn't mean that solar is going in, but it's the right step to take. And then I can even put a plug in for one of our customers, but the city of Connersville, Indiana. Most people, almost maybe everyone on this call hasn't heard of Connersville, but they are now 94% offset, right? Like they took it, they did it. We're at 14 of their municipality sites. So it really is. I mean, we're past early adopters and first movers, and it's accessible and available to everybody. You don't need to be one of the large metropolitan cities with large load and maybe larger resources to do it. Anyone can take this up and do it. And I think, part of the municipalities that we've worked with, they not only want to say, we can do, but they want to inspire their community. And it's supposed to, inspire the residential industry and the commercial partners and players in that area too. So I do think there's part of that. And I think, the universities and municipalities, that's part of what is on their shoulders, is to inspire the community around them and show that it can be done.
All right, so I want to ask a question. I'm going to give us the opportunity for a final question, because believe it or not, we're almost at time. But before we do that, I actually want to ask a question, and thank you for all of the questions that have come in. I'm so excited to see those. We're not able to get to every single one of them, so apologies for that. The question has come in actually about it's back to the Biden administration. So if there was one thing that this new DOE or the new the new administration could do, what would that one thing be? Is there one? Can you put your finger on just one that might help from a policy perspective or an enabling technology perspective?
I mean, I'll happily give my opinion. So before I was a solar person. I was just a lawyer in private practice representing companies. And one thing I know about companies, and Erin, correct me if I'm wrong, but companies like certainty, right? They like to understand what the rules of the road are. They can plan for them, strategize around them, and build their business around them. And so one of the most important levers and tools that the federal government has is the investment tax credit. We have built, hundreds, like so many gigawatts of solar as a result of that tool. And so the one thing I would ask for is long-term tax certainty so that the businesses in our nation can continue to innovate. They will figure out the technology. I have the utmost faith in our universities and our national labs. Like, I'm convinced that will happen. But if it happens not tethered to kind of the financing piece, it's not going to matter. And so mine would be long-term tax certainty, ideally a long-term extension of the investment tax credit.
And I would build on that, because so much of our portfolio is that MUSH market is, that Abby mentioned, was incentives that aren't tied just to tax. So we do have many clients where the ITC sits on the table. So either clear across the board third-party ownership laid out, or to have incentives that aren't tied directly to cash. And, Abby's nodding along because this is a big topic with SEIA right now and with the Biden administration.
So Erin, how about you?
I couldn't have said it better than Abby did. I think that's exactly what would boost for us.
So certainty. Yes. All right. So then the last question, and again, I want to thank all of you for being here. Tell me if there was one, and I know we just did a one thing, but I really do want like one thing that you really want people to know about the industry. So separate from the administration and what the policy needs to be, what's their number one sort of takeaway that you want people to leave with today in terms of the future of this? And Erin, I'm actually going to start with you, and then we'll have Jennifer, and then Abby will finish with you.
I think mine is a little bit less industry related. I'll leave that to the ladies, but from a corporate perspective, I want to leave with an kind of understanding that there are certain levers within corporations, and that's going to be different depending on the goals and mission of the organization. So to really enact change and to make sure that you are fulfilling your sustainability strategy and really seeking change in that way, find the levers. If it's your CEO and they're concerned about reputation or meeting the goals that they've set out for sustainability, whatever that might be, just find the need and fill it. So I just want to push that home, because I think from a corporate perspective, like, we can have all of the right incentives, we can have the right intentions, but we need to actually get the projects done and do the work. So find the levers in your organization and pull on them.
Yeah, I think that's great, Erin. And I think that I'd say, it's not even the future, it's now. Like, it's happening, you can do it now. And I think it's not getting overwhelmed and not trying to go from, they say like 0 to 60, but not trying to go from where you're at now to 100% offset. It's a phased approach, and to start analyzing and reviewing and putting together that plan. Like any other way that you grow your business, view it as a phased approach, and then start making tactical moves to get there.
Excellent. And Abby?
I would say, I would agree wholeheartedly that solar is certainly accessible to all companies, but at SEIA, we are really remain singularly focused on ensuring that solar is available to all communities. And so we have a really strong focus on equity and justice, and making sure that technology is available, that generation source is available. But also, as we think about this solar plus decade and going from 250,000 Americans employed in solar to 600,000 by the end of the decade, those employees and those business owners, not just employees, need to be as diverse as our nation. And so we spend a lot of time and a lot of effort and invite anyone to partner with us to make sure that we fulfill that promise to our industry.
So with that, it's a great place for us to end our conversation today. I want to thank all of our guests, Erin, Abby, and Jennifer. And thank your organizations for letting us have you for this important 45-minute conversation. Thank you all for joining us today, and looking forward to seeing you in the future. Please do sign up to join us for Energy Week and those upcoming webinar sessions. All of that information is available on our website. And so I will sign off for today, and thank you all again. We will see you again soon. Thank you.
Thanks all.
Great.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Anna. Thank you, everyone.